morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And in this one, we're going to be breaking down a very major update that Blizzard has applied with this most recent hotfix that is going to enable you a great opportunity to get back into the game, get your alts going, and unlock some limited time rewards, as well as exploring some PvP data analytics. There is a lot of curious stuff in there that I am very interested to check out to see how each individual spec is stacking up against the rest of them. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, educational and entertaining content, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. So first things first is that there was a couple of bug fixes. So for Attribution Paladins, they've resolved an issue where Hammer of Light was not casting properly in high haste situations. I don't know if you're experiencing that too much in PvP. Likely like a Bloodlust scenario would be the thing here. And they've also snipped out this soul swap bug that was happening. So for a couple of days, Affliction Warlocks are able to soul swap Unstable Affliction stacks to like 15 and completely one-shot targets. That's out of the game. You're not going to be able to do that anymore. They have significantly nerfed the difficulty of Midnight Falls when it comes to the raid difficulty now that the Hall of Fame is concluded and we have our top 100 guilds all the way through. So if you're interested in checking out that raid or picking up any loot in there and you were kind of avoiding it because it was too tough, it is significantly reduced in difficulty at this point. They have also uncapped crests for PvE players. So now you're going to just be able to farm out as many mythic crests as you want, as many heroic crests as you want, fully upgrade everything and let loose the alts, as well as for player versus player, because there was a lot of questions around this, whether or not they had uncapped it or not. It is officially uncapped. It is also important to note that isn't listed here that they are boosting honor and conquest gains by about 30 and 40% respectively. So if you want to get back into the game and it looked like a bit of a headache to cap your character and get it back into the match or get an alt going, now is the time. Now is the time to get in there, because that I noticed the influx of conquest. And they also have a box that you can buy on the conquest vendor on the last page that you can send to your alts, which will then give them a piece of conquest gear for a very discounted price at $375 conquest a box, although it is a random piece of gear, but it is a very efficient way of just getting item level slapped onto your character and basically getting it good to go. So they've done a lot to make the game more accessible with this patch. And then also MMR is increasing in rated PvP, so the likelihood of getting those rewards if you wanted to go after the Galaxy Weapon enchant elite sets, and maybe even possibly Gladiator mount if they can keep up this pace of MMR injection. Gladiator, I think as time moves on, it's going to be a lot more accessible. So if you've ever felt like it was just out of your reach, not really a reality, I think this season may be your season if things continue as they are at the moment. So definitely warm yourself up for that. But that's it for the news here. Those are just the main points, some really big ones, although a small amount of them, but some big ones. Let's jump into the data analytics over here, because this stuff, I found this very interesting to see. I'm going to move my camera over because I'm blocking all the important data tidbits here. So what we're looking at is we are looking at the rated solo shuffle, all ratings. We're going to be able to see how many matches of a specialization was played. We're going to be able to see their win rate. We're going to see their average damage per second. We're going to see their burst damage, and we're going to see their average health per second, and we're going to see their first blood percentage. So this is going to tell you like which specs are really good ones to target. If you're having a hard time in PvP, like I don't know who to target. What's the best target? First blood analytics are going to give you a pretty good idea of that, because if they have a high first blood percentage, it means that that target is likely a really good one to go after, or a high priority one that you need to shut down. So Disciplined Priests here have a staggering 9,329 matches, and we look at that relative to the other specs here, it's like almost triple basically everything else. But its win rate is actually hovering just under 50%, which means it's probably more close to a balanced state. Average DPS is 11,000, which is about half of a DPS. Its burst DPS though is 60,000, which is pretty high relative to most other healers here. And its average health per second is 39,000, which is pretty in line with other specializations. And its first blood is a measly 3.6%. Now, healers are generally, I would say, harder to take out And it's more difficult to convince players actually a lot of times to attack a healer, because sometimes it can actually be good, especially if a Disc Priest is playing Void Weaver, to attack them and try and run them down. But I think that's why the first blood rate is so low for healers, especially for Disc Priest, is because it is a bit more durable. But there are situations where attacking it is a good idea. Arms Warrior have had a massive influx, up to 6,112 matches this week, 51.1% win rate, which is very solid. Great overall average DPS at 25,000 and 106,000 burst damage with 5.2k health per second and a 45.8% death rate. So quite a much higher death rate here. They are a main priority target, attacking them, snaring them, and kind of just blasting them while they're trying to push through and wreck you, so they can be a great target. Retribution Paladins are still holding strong with 5,600 matches played, 50% win rate, 23k average DPS, 121,000 burst DPS, and 8.1k health per second with a 36.5% death rate. So some pretty standardized death rates amongst these. They are decent targets overall in PvP. Frost Mage at 4,883 matches played this week, 49.2% win rate, so actually a little bit lower than 50%, 22,000 average DPS with a 112% burst DPS, likely a fully channeled Ray of Frost there, and 4.7k health per second, which I'm honestly surprised to see it lower than Warrior, considering I don't know if Altar Time is included on the healing for this or not. It probably isn't, because Altar Time and Barrier, I was really expecting Frost Mage to have more than this. They do have almost a 70% first blood rate, which means Frost Mages are targeted quite frequently. You want to be shutting down Ray of Frost, trying to put pressure on them. Although some classes, it can be better to just not attack them. So it's interesting, it's such a high death rate. This is all ratings, so maybe it's more lower rated mages are a better target, because as you get higher rated, I swear Frost Mage becomes a much more challenging target to actually take down. Beast Mastery Hunter with 4,534 matches played this week, 50% win rate, 25,000 average DPS, 107,000 burst with a 1.8k health per second, and a 40% first blood rate. So Beast Mastery Hunter seemed like a decent target. Devourer Demon Hunters, 4,528 matches played this week, 50% win rate, 29,000 average DPS, the highest that we've seen so far, with 170,000 burst damage and 6.5k health per second, and only a 25% first blood rate. So Devourer overall looking like a really good spec based on the stats here to pick up. Very strong numbers there. Restoration Druid, 3,863 matches, less than a 50% win rate. I do think that this is attributed to the fact that it's a bit more difficult to play than other healers. Its average damage per second at 4.8k, but its burst DPS at 33,000. So this is likely Feral Frenzy in cat form. Average health per second is 40,000, and it has an 11% death rate. So Resto Druid, highest death rate of all the healers that we've seen so far. Definitely a good one to go after. And then Holy Priest, 3,669 matches played, 49.4% win rate, 2.3k average DPS, which I don't think is surprising. It just doesn't have a lot of spells that do damage other than Holy Fire now. But its burst DPS is 27k, so that Chastise double Holy Fire can do some decent burst. Average health per second is actually the highest at 43,000, and its first blood rate is 3.1%. So it seems like don't attack a Holy Priest pretty much ever based on these stats. Mistweaver Monk, 3,445 matches this week, 48.3% win rate, 5.1k average DPS, 46,000 burst DPS. So second highest healer in terms of burst DPS. Average health per second is 41,000 with an 8.2% first blood rate. So Mistweavers a little bit higher actually on the death rate here. And I think they are a decent target, especially with how much channeling they have to do now. So stunning them and interrupting them can be a great opportunity to create pressure basically for your team. Restoration Shamans, 3,134 matches, above a 50% win rate. This is the highest win rate healer, is Restoration Shaman. Although I think for a lot of people, they consider it maybe the weakest. Maybe Holy Paladin is the weakest, and Resto Shaman's like close to the bottom. But Resto Shaman must be stepping up a lot. Average DPS just under 5,000. Burst DPS is 50,000. How are they hitting 50,000 burst damage on Restoration Shaman? Is that like you hard-casted Lava Burst into a proc Lava Burst or something like that? Into a Lasso maybe? I've never hit 50,000 burst DPS. So is it the Lightning Bolt build? There's something going on with Shaman, I want to say. With my most recent experience playing this patch, maybe Resto Shaman is a lot better than we're giving it credit for. Average health per second, perfectly in line with the other healers at 41,000, and a 5.5% first blood rate, which is honestly higher than I thought. But I think some things like Frost Death Knights can definitely target you down. Holy Paladin with 3,100 matches, less than a 50% win rate, 5.1k average DPS, 37k burst DPS. You were like the top burst at the start of the expansion, now you're the lowest almost, and 38,000 health per second. So lowest health per second, 12% death rate. So highest death rate, lowest health per second, middle of the pack burst damage, middle of the pack sustained damage, less than 50% win rate. So I would say Holy Paladin, based on the analytics, is definitely the weakest performing healer. We've got Affliction Warlock at 50% win rate, 2,900 matches, 26,000 sustained damage, and 110k burst. So those Dark Harvest windows are definitely munching. 8.7k health per second, and a 60% death rate. So if you don't like getting attacked, don't play an Affliction Lock, because that means you're going to get attacked a lot with a 60% death first blood rate. Unholy DKs are at 2,768 matches, just under 50% win rate, 27,000 average DPS, 106 burst, and 4.1k health per second, and a 47.3% death rate. So Death Knights are focused pretty heavily as well. We have Windwalker Monks, also 2,622 matches, just under a 50% win rate, 25,000 average DPS, 130k burst, only 3.7k health per second, and a 50% first blood rate. So Windwalkers, great specialization to target based on these analytics. Preservation Evoker, this has kind of been the go-to healer so far for the patch. I'm curious what the analytics have to say. 2,600 matches, 55% win rate, highest win rate we've seen. 6.7k sustained DPS and 70k burst, which is the highest. So highest burst, highest overall healing at 52,000, and only a 5.1% death rate. Numbers don't lie here. The vibes and the numbers are lining up. Preservation Evoker is a dominant force. Subtlety Rogue at 2,416 matches, 48% win rate, only a 17k sustained damage and 90k burst. So Subtlety seems to be falling off pretty hard here. 2.8k health per second and only in a 43% death rate. So pretty high death rate, lowest sustained damage we've seen, and burst, not even leaning, towards the top side here for a lot of the specializations. Fury Warrior, this is an interesting one to put side by side with Arms Warrior. So you've only got 1,887 matches, just under a 50% win rate, which is very similar to Arms. You actually do more average DPS, 2,000 more average DPS. You do 107k burst compared to the Arms Warrior's 106. By all numerical numbers, you're actually better than Arms Warrior, but there's way less of you. Based on the statistical data, you're actually better than Arms Warrior, but there's way less than you. That's pretty crazy. I think it's likely because we're in a melee meta, and Fury, I think, gets kind of crunched by melee DPS as opposed to Arms. Has a bit better tools, bit better cleave, but they are very close, like side by side in terms of balance. Enhancement Shaman has seen a major uptick this patch, but still only 1,823 matches, a 53% win rate, which is good, 28,000 sustained DPS, and 150,000 burst. 5.4 thousand health per second and a 54% death rate. So they do get targeted a bit, but these numbers are really good for enhanced. Those are some really solid numbers. Outlaw Rogue, only 1,786 matches, 50% win rate, 23,000 sustained damage, 90,000 burst, 2.8 thousand healing, and just under a 40% first blood rate. So Outlaw is kind of resolved into the spot where it's like mostly just main Outlaw Rogue players, I think, are playing it again. It's not as dominant, at least in Solo Shuffle. Shadow Priest, very curious to see this one. 1,666, 50% win rate, almost 30,000 sustained damage, so pretty high. I think that's the highest sustained we've seen. The Devourer actually is higher than Shadow. That is crazy. 83k burst, and the highest health per second at almost 8,000, and a 45% first blood rate. I think Shadow is getting some really good stats, honestly, right now. With this current patch. Assassination Rogue, 1,631 matches, but a very good win rate, 53%. That's a very solid one. 26,000 sustain, 104,000 burst, 3.2k average health per second, and a 55% death rate. So first blood rate. So definitely a good target, though, to go after, a squishier one to go after. Marksmanship Hunter, 1,591 matches, only a 44% win rate. Win rates for Marksmanship Hunter are plummeting. Average DPS, 24,000, very much so in the middle of the pack. 117,000 burst damage, 3.2k health per second, and a 55% first death rate. So Marksman Hunter, looking at least in Shuffle, like it could be falling off a bit here. Havoc Demon Hunter, one that I think a lot of people are considering one of the weakest melee. So what do the stats say? 1,259 matches, 49% win rate. Some high sustain, 27,000 sustain. Decent burst at 108,000. 7,000 health per second, second highest health per second of all the DPS. And it only dies 28% of the time. So a very low first blood rate. Stats are saying Havoc is not too shabby. Not too shabby. Feral Druid, 1,237 matches, just under 49% win rate, 25,000 sustain, and 86,000 burst, which is kind of crazy because this class is way harder to pull off, but at the same time has way more crowd control. So I do think your damage needs to be a little bit more in control because you have stuns to reduce damage from other players and cyclones and roots that they don't have access to. Decent health per second though at 5.1k and a 44% first blood rate. Honestly, the first blood rates are a lot more balanced than a lot of other seasons. Sometimes there's DPS specs that have like a 1% death rate and you're just like, it just never dies. For balanced druids, they're at 1,193 matches, almost a 52% win rate, which is really good. 26,000 sustained damage and 107,000 burst. Very good, respectable, 4,000 health per second, and a 57% first death rate, which is much lower than it normally is. I feel like this is normally a higher stat for boomies. They're dying a lot. Frosty K's at 1,189 matches, 50% win rate, 27,000 sustained damage, which is really just in line with everything, and then 141,000 burst. Some crazy bursts on Frosty K, and 6.2 thousand health per second. So honestly, I think Frosty K is better than Unholy, even though Unholy has double the play. It's double the play, but Frost has a way bigger peak, although it does have a higher death rate at 60.6%. So you will get targeted a lot, it seems like, as a Frosty K, but you do some monster burst based on these analytics. Elemental Shaman, 1,122 matches, 50% win rate, 25,000 sustain, 121,000 burst, 4.5 thousand health per second, and 45% death rate. So Ellie Shaman looking pretty decent. This is one that I think is an important one. Destro lock, because I think for a lot of people they probably consider Destro one of the weakest. Maybe Fire Mage is the weakest, but Destro has just over 1,000 matches, slightly lower than 50% win rate, 22,000 sustain, which is really low, and I would actually point that out for Destro. Incinerate and Conflagrate and Immolate just do no damage. It's basically just Chaos Bolt and Soulfire that do damage. Your burst is solid though at 123k, 8.4k health per second. I think that's actually the highest. It's higher than Shadow Priest. But you have a almost 70% first blood rate, so you are going to get run down pretty much anytime you're playing this spec in Solo Shuffle. Devastation Evoker, 955 matches, 50% win rate, high sustain at 29,000, and good burst at 129,000, 4.1k health per second, respectable, and you're not really dying that much. Only a 35.9% first blood rate. So Devastation, really solid pick overall. Fire Mage, 927 matches, just above a 50% win rate. Actually, a lot more healthy than I thought. Sustained damage, 20,000 on the lower end for the specs that we've seen. However, the burst just at 106, health per second is at 5.3. Although you do have a 67% first blood rate, and that's likely because there's just so many hunters, right? And hunters just love targeting mages. So on the squishier side of things with low sustain, which is lining up perfectly with what I would have said about it based on my opinion. Survival Hunter, 906 matches, just under a 50% win rate, 24,000 sustain with 144,000 burst, which lines up with Survival pretty much only doing damage and takedown, and then that's such a big difference, right? Your overall damage, 20,000, your burst is like 8 times as high as your overall sustain. This is what I meant by cooldowns versus non-cooldown damage. Like, that is a staggering gap. Only 24,000 or 2.4k health per second. However, you don't die that much. 41.2% first blood rate. Well, one of the lower ones. Demonology Warlock, 881 matches. Oh, the win rate's awful on this. Demo's dead, guys. 45.2%. Only 20,000 average DPS. Only a 76k burst and only 6.6k health per second. 43.5% death rate. At least your death rate's not terrible. But the stats here are telling me that, oh, buddy, you are bad, dude. Demonology has to be the worst caster based on the analytics here. Arcane Mage, 427 matches, a very high win rate, almost 55% win rate with only 20k sustained damage. However, 123k burst, 3.6k health per second, and a almost 70% first blood rate. Though you're going to get targeted on this guy. It's not welcome to the new players, generally speaking. It'd be pretty tough to pull off. Prop Paladin, 150 matches, 50% win rate. Oh my god, what? 14,000 sustain, 125k burst. So Prop Pally is still very strong. 13k health per second. That's the highest health per second we've seen of any deep quote-unquote DPS. And you only have a 25% first death rate. There's more prop games than AUG games, dude. Augmentation only has 81 matches and a 44% win rate. Okay, you might be worse than Demo. 18k sustain, 114k burst, 3.7k health per second, and a 40% first blood rate. So Augmentation and Demo definitely towards the bottom here. Guardian Druid has some matches, 79 matches, 44% win rate though, 21k sustain, 111k burst, still seems very high, 13k health per second, and only a 2.2% first blood. So if you never want to die, play a Guardian Druid. They never die. Brewmaster Monk, 36 matches, 41% win rate, which is very low. 24,000 sustain, 99k burst, 21k health per second. That is insane. They never die. They never die. 0 deaths in solo shuffle. Prot Warrior, 31 matches, 24% win rate, which is god awful. 13,000 sustain, which is terrible. 62,000 health per second for the tanks we've seen is awful. 62k burst, which is awful. 10,000 health per second, which is meh. And then, but they still just never die. And then we don't see any other tanks represented, at least on the data performance here. So an interesting chart to go through to see like which specs are, based on the numbers, actually performing well or not performing well. And Demo, Og, and Fire Mage seem to be the ones that are struggling quite heavily, I think, with this most recent update. But a lot of specs are actually doing really well as far as the side-by-side comparison. So it's a great time to get in, get some alts with that Conquest cap unlocked, as well as the Conquest boost to start getting geared up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and this breakdown. Thank you guys very much for watching, as always, and I will see you in the next one.